Thank you very much, Madam Deputy President. And may I also start by commending the Honourable Member for Mersey on the outstanding work he has done over the last month. It's been a mammoth effort with broad range and engaging consultation process throughout our state. The Honourable Member for Mersey really does deserve credit. The bill represents substantial work which has been endorsed by many community organisations, including the Tasmanian chapter of Dying with Dignity and the Tasmanian branch of Doctors for Assisted Dying Choice. However, there's also been significant criticism from religious groups as well as from the Tasmanian branch of the Australian Medical Association, which rejects the concept of voluntary assisted dying outright. This is the fourth attempt in a decade to legislate voluntary assisted dying here in Tasmania. And whilst the Tasmanian approach over the years has been try and try again, other states such as Victoria and Western Australia have adopted a pragmatic and evidence-based approach, forming a consensus between community, religious and medical organisations. Both jurisdictions successfully passed legislation after rigorous parliamentary debate, but without prolonged lobbying, bizarre astroturfing and personal attacks. I firmly believe that the time has come to legislate voluntary assisted dying here in Tasmania. And, Honourable Member, I know we live in difficult times. I know we live under a declared public health emergency. And without disrespect to the government's agenda, but if we can debate cat management in those times, surely we can debate in private members' time, private members' day, end-of-life choices for patients who suffer from a terminal illness. Surely it's possible for us to do that. Madam Deputy President, my views on voluntary assisted dying have changed over the years. I went to a university that was established in 1409, so over 600 years ago. I gave the Hippocratic Oath. Assisted dying was not something I ever wanted to concern myself with under any circumstances during my medical career. As a young doctor, I was driven to find the best medical options, the most advanced treatments. However, over the years, I sensed that medical treatment would not always give us all the answers. I had to realize that at times I was unable to meet the needs of my patients, regardless of being able to access the most advanced medications, health and medical services. And this became even more apparent when I trained as a GP and when I was asked by my patients to look after them at the end of their lives. Looking after patients at the end of their lives is one of the most rewarding parts of being a GP. We pride ourselves that we are practitioners of first and last resort, that we are looking after our patients from cradle to the grave. And we take this literally. It is our defining professional aspiration. Not often, but sometimes, the outcome is not what we are hoping for. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, patients do not die a good death. That is despite the best efforts of doctors, despite the best efforts of our fantastic nurses in hospitals, hospices, and in the community. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, you as a nurse and of course, being very engaged in the profession, would know about that. I recall a patient of mine, a mother of two in her early 30s, who came and see me in my practice because she noticed a tiny ulcer in her throat that was there for 6 weeks. And she knew that wasn't right because it wasn't going away, and she also felt sort of a lump in her neck as well. It was a bit hard, and she wasn't a smoker. It didn't look right to me either, so I took a biopsy, and of course it was a highly aggressive cancer. Of course it was highly aggressive. But we trust our great health system, and of course she was seen by a specialist in Hobart straight away. And because we have choices and options, we choose, let's get another option from specialists in Melbourne. Because the cancer had already spread, there was an option to have surgery anymore. There was only an option to try radiation. And there was a new trial, try some chemotherapy as well. And of course it worked. It really worked. Until it didn't. Until it didn't, 8 months later. Yeah, she of course came back to me and said, what are we going to do now? And of course you say, oh, let's try something else. It's always an option. It's always something we can try. And that's what we did. We call this rescue chemotherapy and more radiation. And that initially worked, then it didn't. That was after 6 weeks. And then we didn't have any medical options anymore. And we discussed, what are we going to do then? Well, let's talk about, comfort care. And let's talk about palliative care. There wasn't any active treatment for her anymore. She had a very, very poor prognosis. And our palliative care system is really good in Tasmania. I'm very proud of our specialists. I'm really proud of our community nurses who are so engaged in palliative care. It is world class. So we tried everything we can to keep her comfortable. But the cancer didn't stop growing, got bigger. And because it was a very difficult location, put more and more pressure on her throat. So she lost her voice very early on, despite trying cortisone and all the other things we had. She could still swallow, but she couldn't really talk anymore. So we communicated in writing. So she would write me little notes, always on with pencil, fine pencil on grey paper, always the same type of paper. I saw her at least once a day, if not twice a day, before going to work in the morning after I finished off. And she was desperate to stay at home because she had 2 young children, and a husband as well. So she couldn't talk. She struggled to swallow. And because we couldn't control the edema and the swelling, she couldn't really breathe proper anymore. And that was really a tricky situation, in particular at night, because when you can't sleep, because you can't breathe, and the cortisone keeps you up at night anyway, because you're all hyped up because of the medication, what you're going to do. And that dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, and we tried absolutely everything we had. So one evening when I went back to her, and I was expecting again, something written on the note, what I saw on that note was something written that read, "Please finish it off." So I got a note that said, "Please finish it off." How do you respond to that? How do you respond to that? When that's the question I would have asked my doctor as well if I had been in her situation at the time. So I couldn't really answer it. I was trying to wiggle my way around there. This was all about comfort care. So she struggled. And the clinical team that was working with her struggled as well. I certainly struggled. I know that she wanted a good death, and there wasn't much I can do for her. And when just a couple of weeks later I got a phone call to come out urgently because something happened, and I rushed out. It took me half an hour. And the ambulance already, took her away to hospital because what happened was she developed a bleeding there. So it was blood coming from that cancer site. And I was bleeding all over the house. And the first thing I saw was towels, blood-stained, and pillows. She was rushed off, and of course she died on the way to hospital. Kids were at school. How to deal with that? It's not the death she wanted. So I'm going back to script now, because even after all those days when I see her husband, when I see her children in my community, I still feel guilty. I feel guilty because despite the best, most advanced, comprehensive care, I failed. I failed because she did not have a good death. But I'm a health professional. I'm not meant to grieve over my patients. Yet I do, and many of my colleagues do too. Nationally, 1 in 20 terminally ill patients suffer despite having access to the best palliative, allied health and spiritual care. The consequences are diabolical, and we've heard about this. We've heard that in Queensland, more than 150 terminally ill patients commit suicide every year. In Western Australia, 1 in 7 suicides involves a patient with a terminal illness. These statistics should be a wake-up call, because despite our best efforts and substantial investment in palliative care, we are clearly failing too many terminally ill patients who continue to suffer unbearably. The Australian palliative care system ranks second best in the world already, just behind the palliative care system in the UK that ranks first worldwide. Yet, even in the UK, there is bipartisan support to legislate assisted dying and to set up an inquiry into the law. What's happening now? It's happening now. And they have COVID in the UK. But it's happening now. The case for legislating voluntary assisted dying has clearly been made. There is conclusive evidence that even with the best end-of-life care, not all suffering can be alleviated. And I want to be clear that prolonging death is not the same as extending life. Prolonging death is not the same as extending life. One of the most profound writings on this matter is from the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Carey. And I'd like to quote from his letter that was released earlier this year because it is important in the context. He says, "When I spoke out in support of assisted dying in 2014, many people were surprised. They had assumed I subscribed to the view that to help shorten life in any way, even at the voluntary request of a dying person, was morally wrong. I did believe that. But through experience and frank discussions about assisting dying with my distinguished palliative care and pain specialists, my views changed. I began to see that while medicine can do remarkable things for most dying patients, there is an unfortunate minority who are forced to suffer unimaginable pain and misery without any expectation of a return to health. It is, of course, profoundly Christian to do all we can to ensure nobody suffers against their wishes. Some people believe they will find meaning in their own suffering in their final months and weeks of life. I respect that. But it cannot be justified to expect others to share that belief. And correspondingly, any proposed assisted dying law must protect the rights of doctors and others with a conscientious objection, so they do not have to participate. I'm puzzled that some people oppose a change in the law that aims to relieve the experience of excruciating pain, as well as enable suffering people to end their lives with dignity. autonomy is a key element in medical care. Why do we set aside for those who refuse to prolong their own painful death? Whether believers or not, most of us recognize the power of faith, the values and traditions of which should never be underestimated. But an unexamined faith, which does not rise to the challenges posed by modern medicine, can create tensions. 3 arguments sit at the heart of any case constructed to oppose change. Concerns that legislation may have unintended consequences. Misunderstanding about how assisted dying works in practice in places like the United States and here in Australia. I will not repeat the for and against arguments here. Instead, I ask you to consider why more assisted dying laws are being passed around the world rather than existing ones repealed. Why have religious leaders in jurisdictions such as Oregon told me their societies have not descended into the dystopias once predicted by those who campaign to block legislation? We should not shy away from those questions. Nor should we protect ourselves from the reality of what is happening at present: immense suffering in spite of access to the best care. People opting for lonely DIY suicides, grieving relatives being charged with murder, and in one case, a pioneering doctor feeling he had no option but to starve and dehydrate himself to death. Some people claim that by legalizing assisted dying, we can be crossing the Rubicon. Yet I consider this a crude attempt to mask the ethical and legal difficulties we have already stumbled into. Laws do indeed send powerful social messages. I want to send the message that we live in a compassionate society that has the courage to confront complexity, not one that bases its rules on fear or misunderstanding. I have observed a shift in pace in this debate in recent years. I meet far more people of faith who share my views. In Parliament, there is growing acceptance that change is needed. History will no doubt conduct a forensic examination of how the assisted dying debate unfolded. I would not wish to see doctors criticized for being the last group defending a status quo many now recognize is leading to great suffering. Honourable members, I agree with the view of the former Archbishop of Canterbury. I also believe that the morals of others should not prohibit access to voluntary assisted dying for those who seek it. As parliamentarians, we must consider, argue, appraise and amend legislation to ensure appropriate scrutiny, support and regulation. Maintaining the status quo is no longer acceptable to the wider Tasmanian community. It was not acceptable to the people in Victoria, and it was not acceptable to the people in Western Australia either. Our aim must be to pass comprehensive and cohesive legislation that provides for rigorous oversight and appropriate conscientious objection. Our aim must be to pass legislation that actually can be implemented. There is no need for yet another inquiry or advisory panel. There just isn't. Everything that can be said on this matter has been said. Expert witnesses have repeated themselves endlessly. Every important consideration has been thoroughly canvassed. Provisions on the specific eligibility of patients, demonstrated competencies of medical practitioners, appropriate conscientious objection, avoidance of coercion, and comprehensive regulatory oversight. The Tasmanian public needs to be assured that any legislation will only ever serve to permit, not to mandate, assisted dying. In closing, this is exactly what I'm committed to work constructively on, to refine and enhance the legislation over the coming weeks. It's what our communities expect, and it is what we as elected representatives should deliver. Thank you.
Question is that the bill be now read the second time.